From Italia, IMO, Cardinal Quest 2. Cardinal Quest 2 is a roguelike by Randomised Limited and it came out on the 23rd of November. So this is Cardinal Quest 2. Now this is a roguelike. I would say it's more roguelike than roguelite. What's the difference, you might say? Well, the whole thing is obviously emulating the original Rogue, in which you move, the enemies move, randomised dungeons, and a lot of death, essentially, and start from the beginning. This is very much so in the same style. Enemies move when you move, you start from literally scratch every single time, and there are randomised sort of dungeons, and you have to choose what items and whatever to pick up, and that's to use out of your game. This, I would say, is more rogue-like than roguelite, because it does use quite a lot of the sort of elements behind the original Rogue. However, I do have a few problems with it, and we'll get into that later on. Now, this is a sort of port from the phones, so that is probably the reason why the problems that I'm going to have later on are actually in here. Let's have a look though at this as a PC application. This came out on Steam and seems to be a different program. It doesn't seem to be a direct port because the options menu, as you can see here, sound and music, separate sliders, full screen on and off, and you can configure all of the keys. It does seem like they actually have put a little bit of effort. Generally you don't even get this in normal ports. Well, like the other graphic options, but I did get 60 all the way through, so I'm not too miffed about all of this, to be fair. It's not a bad options menu, but, you know, what are you going to do? Let's go straight into the shall we then. So, now the Steam page seems to say there are 3 acts, and seems to say that there's a story linked into them. There isn't. I don't know why they even put it on there. All you basically do is end up playing one of these guys here. Now, the fighter over here is your classic walk up and just twat people continually, and is sort of a bit more tanky than the others. But really, the only difference between these lot here, other than the alchemist, is that, or seems to be other than the alchemist rather, is that you just have a different skill when you start out. So when you start out, the fighter gets a buff skill, and these guys here seem to get other skills that from the start than the other guys. It doesn't seem like there's much of a difference. We're going to hop in as a fighter because it's going to be easier for me to show you the mechanics. And what you do basically is you choose what act, choose what character you're going to use, and you only get, I think, the first 3 when you first start, and you unlock these as you go along. Now, you get different perks that get unlocked when you do specific things. It's not like you have to complete the level so many times. You have to do specific things. For example, I would have had to do certain things with them, but this really says start with Vital Strike instead of Berserk. I've got to do as a fighter, clear an act without spending a talent point on hard difficulty or higher. That's obviously quite a big challenge there, but these here are all based on achievements, and down here the same situation here as well. Speedrun 2, clear Act 2 in less than 45 minutes game time. I probably could do that quite easy actually. It's not too difficult. Each one's about 30 minutes. I might be able to speedrun that one there. But then again though, 45 minutes is game time. It's about 30 minutes in real life time, and we'll talk about what game time actually means. Basically, all you can do at the beginning is choose an individual perk if you so desire, or an individual different type of gear set. So for example, I could start with a different breastplate over there, or a scroll here, which is a scroll of blink, and so on and so forth. We're going to go ahead and create the character. By the way, the only customization you get are the colours, and as I said before, everything restarts from the beginning. So you go through there, and then you can choose the difficulty. These affect the enemies, and this thing at the bottom down here affects whether or not you can continue more than once. You get 1 life thing essentially, and once that's spent up, you then have to take a hit on your high score in order to continue. So we're going to go into the normal mode so I can at least show you the mechanics without dying continually. So this is my guy here, and as you can see, the art style is, I don't know where it is. It seems to be just above NES and just below SNES. I'd have preferred if they went all the way to SNES though, to be fair, because it doesn't look that amazing, but you'll see more of that in a minute anyway. At the bottom of your screen we've got different skills, so like I said before, this is all seems to change per class. And the thing you get as a warrior is Berserk, which affects your attack and your speed. And above there you have 5 different item slots, and this here is the thing that restores your life when you start up. You get a health potion, and you get a wheat stone, which is used to basically buff your blades up. On top of that there, you do get character stats down here, and the character stats are based upon your equipment and your talents down here. Now, I'm going to walk up here and try to explain the rest of it. Essentially, like I said before, when the enemy moves, when you move and the enemy moves and the enemy attacks in the same way, you basically just ram into them. And you can choose different skills, like at the bottom down there. Now, you notice there's a little bit of a sort of a slice right here, and it says 14. The skills on the bottom, they replan based upon the stat that is required for it. So if you're a mage, most of the magic spells will require intellect. Some of them will require faith. Obviously, the paladin uses way more of the faith kind of stuff. Let's spawn that down here. You find skills on the floor. You can find items on the floor, or they're in chests. Also, enemies will drop them. When you come to an item, it's a piece of equipment rather, you can choose whether or not to equip it or whether to trash it. Trash it, you get gold, essentially. It tells you what stats you are, and you get a choice right there and then. You can't come back to it. You can come back to items, though. Items are just found on the floor, and for some reason you can come back to them. And this here is essentially the entire game, other than the fact there are shops as well. And you're basically just supposed to survive all the way through. So there's a wand here that's pretty much useless, although it gives me a bit of faith. But I don't really need faith because I'm a warrior. And I'll get on to, straight off, what I like about the game and then what I don't like about the game. Now, firstly, what I like about it is that it's a roguelike, not a roguelite. And I kind of prefer games that do the tactical one move, the other move. You know, one person moves and everyone else moves with them. However, they don't exactly do it very well. That's the downside to it. Now, there's a game called Crypt of the Necrodancer. That's what it's called. And that game there does this much better than this one here does. Also, there's games like Dungeons & Dreadmore, which is way better than this, to be perfectly honest with you. But just go back on to Crypt of the Necrodancer a tiny little bit there. There are enemies in that one there, in which they will move differently depending on how many times the player has moved. In this one over here, there seems to only be, I reckon, about 30 enemies, and they all can be bottled down to either they're going to come up to you and attack you straight away, like this guy, like everyone in the beginning bit here is, or they are going to fire something at you, either they're a mage or they're a ranged character. That is basically every single person. I mean, there are ones that also fire poison at you, but it's so limited. And I can see that they were trying to do something different, like I said before, like Crypt of the Necrodancer was trying something different, but they just didn't do it properly. They haven't put enough variety in here, especially when you go into like the endless mode, for example. It's just the same enemies over and over again, and it doesn't even matter so much that there are, I'd say, I reckon maybe about 30 different enemy sort of skins. It doesn't matter if they all act the same way. And this also gets into the other thing, which is this enough content for the price? Because you're getting 3 acts of, I think there's about 5 or 6 levels, then a boss, and it finishes. There's no storyline to it, there's no attachment to the, I guess they're called Cardinals. I don't know, the game doesn't really tell you, but I guess these are called Cardinals. There's no attachment to them whatsoever. So there's no reason, realistically speaking, to keep on playing the same levels. So there isn't exactly that much content to keep you really interested in the game for a long period of time. That's sort of the problem. And also, one thing I did notice as well, because they keep all of these stats down here pretty much separate, and for example, when you're a mage, you end up, you basically stick your talents into something that gives you spell damage, and that doesn't even seem to affect this attack up here. The attack up here, that one there seems to be the literal face-on warrior hitting them straight on attack, not the spell attack. Because of that reason there, your wizard can just go and pick up an axe and be good with an axe. And if you don't end up doing that, then you end up having the worst time ever, like I ended up having. I basically just gave up not doing that because it took forever to even get anywhere. And that also comes into one of the things I do strongly dislike about this, which is that although they have different classes, realistically speaking, the only way to play this game is to run in and hit people head on, and not play the thief or the ranger or the wizard, or I suppose the other ones aren't too bad. The one that's more melee isn't too bad, to be fair. But really, this game was designed to be warrior, and the reason why is because, look at this area here. This area here is probably the most open area ever, and I could probably go and find you some footage of what's just after this area here, which is the dungeons. And that's what you're spending most of your time in tiny little dungeons. And it just doesn't help that mostly any ranged attack just won't work under that environments. Simply just won't work. So you basically are playing the same character with a slightly different skin and a different starting skill. And you've got to ask yourself, I suppose, which one's probably the best. And I reckon, to be fair, I think the Thief is one of the best because the vanishing skill is actually pretty cool. But that generally means that the game is the same. So there isn't necessarily enough content really to keep you entertained for longer than... Well, I played this for just under 5 hours. I think it's just under 5 hours. It might be just over. You'll see that on your screen right now anyway. And I got quite bored after about 3. And I thought, okay, what I'm going to do, because this is a review, I'll see if my opinion changes in the next couple of hours. And it kind of didn't. So the question comes, okay, would I recommend it? Well, for the time that I played with it, at the first 2 or 3 hours, it was good. It was an alright experience. It was a very simplistic sort of roguelike. However, would I recommend this at the price point for the amount of content that's in there? No. And the reason why is more because the same reason why the other game that I bashed a long, long time ago, it's called, what was it called? It's the Ninja one. It should be on your screen right now somewhere anyway. I bashed that one there because the mobile version seemed to make much more sense. And this one over here has a free mobile version that I did have a look at, and it seems like you could probably play this game for free quite easily on mobile. This version is obviously going to be much more superior to it. Firstly, I've got a bloody button in front of me. I've got an actual controller here pressing all of these. However, this is turn-based, so I don't necessarily think it's going to be too difficult to get used to actually not using it. So, to be perfectly honest with you, it's all right, but it needs to be priced a little better and needs to have much more content. I'm hoping that they're going to bring out a much more DLC for it. Basically, that's my own thoughts. I hope they're going to bring out much more DLC for it, because otherwise this game is not even going to be worth it later on down the line. You get very bored very quickly otherwise. Say very quickly, 2 to 3 hours, but 2 to 3 hours is like for I think it's $15 in America and it's £10 over here, so it's just not quite enough content to keep me entertained for a long period of time. I think that's all I've really got to say on this game, to be fair. There's not quite enough content to keep me enthralled in this. Let's let the guitars play and I'll say my final words. Cardinal Quest is an alright roguelike with quite simplistic mechanics. However, there's just not enough content to it, and it is a little bit too simplistic. Cardinal Quest is on Steam for £10, $15 or your regional equivalent in Europe, for example. I will catch you next time. Goodbye.